My name is Guy Alberghini. This is a broadcast of the United States Constitution. Each broadcast will cover a very small section of the Constitution, policies that go against that section of the Constitution, as well as possible solution or solutions. If you just go along with the bad policies, then you agree with them. And if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. My name's Guy Alberghini. Welcome back to the broadcast. So I told you for a long time now, get in touch with your local leaders, state leaders, and federal leaders. Okay? Here in town, vote for Select Board Guy Alberghini. This broadcast strongly endorses him. So we have a special guest on, all the way from Texas, Diane King.
Yes, sir.
Diane, if you want to say a bit about yourself first before we start.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Been a long time advocate of the even playing field, you might call it. You look at an issue, you think, okay, who's supporting it? That's the biggest issue. Where do I stand on it? Even if I don't know what it is, I go to who's supporting it. Been an advocate for the Third Reich and when I say advocate, I'm not talking about marching in the streets. I'm talking about contending with people in regard to the freedom to be able to express certain points of view in that regard, and also to express those points of view. The issue of freedom of speech has become an issue because of our being prohibited from doing this, particularly in Massachusetts. And that's a lot of where my experience occurred. I had been involved in Toronto for about 15 years in regard to their efforts concerning freedom of speech and their illegal immigration issues, but mostly in regard to basically championing the German people there who do not have a voice. And so anyway, but in the United States, which is very different than Canada, Canada does not have a Bill of Rights. They have the Bill of Rights where it's based on what the government wants you to have. If you do something in disfavor of them, you no longer have your rights, quote unquote. So it isn't really rights. Our country, I wouldn't say it's bulletproof, but it's more concerning for our politicians that we have the First Amendment and we've got the 10 Amendments. And don't you think they hate that? I don't care what they say. Oh, yeah, we support your rights. We're fighting for your rights. Really? No, you're not. And that's not why we go to war either. So I got a real big dose of what is not the truth. All you have to do is look at the politicians, like what's going on today, based on the president's congressional speech. I like to look and see what liberals are annoyed. And I say, he'll say things, and they'll say, "Oh, we don't believe that. We don't stand with that." And I said, "Well, let's just see what happens. We're very, very, very mistrustful. Let's see what happens. Also, let's see what happens when they find out we don't consider Israel first. That's also going to be an issue." But anyway, I'm not sure I answered your question. I did a little bit of the past, a little bit of the present, and a little bit of today.
Yes, you covered quite a bit. So today we're going to be covering this amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the freedom exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Now, where to start, right?
Yes.
Admittedly, this is very nice. Okay, our problem, and I'm not sure about yours, but our issues have always been the government sits back and basically lets their tool corporations do their bidding for them. Now, what I say about that is we have been on a number of social media and regular media online. And so one of them, of course, was YouTube. Jim had 10 channels. I had 5 channels. Eventually, all 15 of our channels were shut down. And this was like 8 years ago. They still are. Every once in a while, I'll check to see if they're up and running. Why would they do that? Well, what about free speech? Doesn't apply to corporations or businesses. It only applies to the government. Now, how do I know that? Because in a few years back, I had 4 cable shows in Framingham, one in Ashland. And the one in Ashland was a lot more agreeable. The ones in Framingham would not allow me to interview Jim Rizzoli because he had been banned from the cable shows on the Framingham cable stations. And as a result of him being banned, they didn't allow me to interview him or present him in any way. So I started the Ashland cable show. And man, I could do almost anything. And then one day I get a note from their attorney. You can't have, you're basically you're being shut off. It was a February, Black History Month. And I was presenting a lot of Black people who opposed basically, you're talking about politics, the politics of the country that came against, let's say, came against their own people for the kind of a behavior they were having. And I had a whole bunch of videos up on that, and I got banned on that particular channel. They would never return my call. Finally, I got a letter from an attorney. We basically banned you because you have Jim Rizzoli on. You've interviewed Jim Rizzoli. So what? Well, he was banned on YouTube. So it was by association and by some excuse, I was prohibited from having my cable show. I had Framingham cable shows until a couple months ago, actually. And they decided they didn't like the method that I use, which was to they uploaded my videos that I would use, and I would use them kind of on a rotating basis every month for about 6 months, and then I'd kind of start over again. They decided you have to do a brand new one each month. Well, I knew my days had been numbered. I'd been on since 2015. And in regard to the Ashland one, we were actually going to go on our way to see an attorney about this when an article came through that declared by the Supreme Court, this is in Massachusetts, businesses do not have to comply with the First Amendment on freedom of speech. It was game over as far as that was concerned.
So yeah, between that and during the previous administration, sending the FBI after parents concerned about what the kids are being taught in school. Not to mention the FBI was directly involved in Facebook and X at the time. It was Twitter at the time.
I can see that. Yeah. And also added to that is the COVID issue that we, Massachusetts people actually had no choice on when it came to health issues concerning their bodies, they had to follow the mandate. And it wasn't a law at that point. They were just mandate type orders, generally from the political body. And so, and they said, well, we like to support the Nuremberg laws. Okay, first of all, you obviously don't know what the Nuremberg laws are. Secondly, this doesn't apply because they declare that the COVID vaccination, we believe it was experimental. They said, oh, it's not experimental, so it's okay if you take it. And it's okay if we force you to take it because it's for the health and betterment of our society. A lot of people rejected that. And that's the freedom to be secure in your own, let's say, body, your own possessions type thing. And they're dictating something that is vehemently opposed. In fact, some would even attempt to invoke the kind of a religious exclusion. It goes against what I believe. They wouldn't accept that that's too bad. You got to do what we want. And this was in Massachusetts. In Texas, they relented a lot sooner. But when I was coming back from Boston, they said you have to have the form to I don't know what the form was even for, but at the door when we were leaving, it wasn't very well organized. I was one of the first ones off. There were police waiting that they wanted to see the form. Well, unfortunately, when I got off, um, I wasn't exclusive. Then the huge amount of people started coming off, and what they were trying to get this person's form and that person's form. I just walked off, and which was a good thing. The next day, they stopped doing these minutia of rules, and then after all this was over, Governor Abbott started declaring no mandates in Texas, none. So we just have to remind him of that. But anyway,
So,
that was a horrible time.
so they were trying to get forms to say that you
Well,
were healthy.
oh yeah, exactly. I was trying to think now, what was the form declaring that your health status? No, I looked it up, and in fact, going into Massachusetts, you had to have a form, and Jim said just don't worry about it. And the policing isn't very good, which is good. That's to our benefit. But it was very restrictive, and I'm not sure if it was saying that I had taken the shot, because I wouldn't have never complied with anything like that. And what's also interesting is that I didn't know how the lockdowns were going to work, because I traveled a great deal. I had an ailing mom. I'd go visit my daughter. I'd go visit Jim on a regular basis. Let me just say, there weren't as many people on the plane as there were before, but the plane still flew. And I told United, you keep flying, I'll keep flying. And but see, and maybe that's the only way to ensure our rights is to push against the restrictions. How about say, no, I don't want to play. Um,
Yeah, so close to the end of that time period, went to wedding with my family in New York State. At that time, in New York State, you didn't have to wear a mask. So we weren't wearing it then, but then, okay, now we're back in Massachusetts.
yeah, yeah, under in the gulags again. I
Yeah,
call it the
so
Stasi. Stasi was East German equivalent to the KGB.
so you mentioned the new Nuremberg
Yeah,
laws.
Nuremberg laws, yeah.
If you could remind people basically what they are.
Well, we're going through a book called The Myth of German Villainy. And one of the major points was you cannot be forced to take a medical procedure you don't want. That was one of the main points of these. There were other things dealing with you're not supposed to marry. This is, I think, the secondary part of them. You're not supposed to marry outside in Germany at the time. Jews aren't supposed to marry Germans, and Germans not Jews. It was the Jews who wanted that. They were so afraid they were going to be assimilated into society that they were not going to have their identity anymore. So they were glad when these Nuremberg laws came out. But but the main point that they focus on is being forced to engage in or take whether even wearing a mask is enforcement of a health, like you were talking about. You didn't have to wear one in New York, and I find that hard to believe, but that's what you say. And you did in Massachusetts. We weren't wearing them in Texas after he started instigating the governor no mandates. And so, but there are still people who they don't become aware of the current policies. And I find that the case in Massachusetts. No, we don't have to wear masks. We don't have to be 6 feet apart. But anyway, the Nuremberg laws to, they're bringing them out was to prevent us from being forced to take medical procedures we did not wish to take.
Hmm, okay. And then, yeah, so that time period, so many years ago now, was definitely against that. They were
Yeah, they're
trying to force everyone.
having a hard time bringing it up again. They're trying to do like the bird flu thing with the chickens. So because we're not buying into it, um, they're raising the price of eggs. I remember, if you recall, when the COVID thing first started coming out, what was the first thing that happened? The first evidence of shortages of products because they had so begun to expand the list of symptoms.
Well, a lot of people were taking paper towels and toilet paper.
Yes, exactly. It was the toilet paper. What? If it's COVID, it's a respiratory uh,
Right.
ailment. In fact, it was essentially to replace flu and pneumonia, but they began to expand it to include all sorts of symptoms. So when people went to the hospital, if you had COVID as the cause, you get the bucks because hospitals were being paid to diagnose patients with COVID. I have a meme of Bonnie and Clyde, and they died, I think, in Texas. By the way, what would they die? The cause, if there's after 166 bullets from the sheriff's, cause of death was COVID. So yeah, that was
Very
a meme I had. And obviously, if somebody was joking around how
bad thing.
ridiculous it was, yeah, I can send it to you. It's good for a laugh
Yeah.
because it's so ridiculous. It is. It is. It's absurd to think that anything we might have might be actually attributed to something that has not even been isolated.
Yeah, and then yeah, they're going to come up with all sorts of things from now
Trying to.
on.
Mhm. But people are just not as uh, cooperative and compliant with it as they were. They're still remembering the nightmare of before. And they don't. And I'll tell you what, I learned a whole lot about. I had worked in the medical profession. I had all five of my kids in home births because of my total mistrust of the medical profession. Um, but I learned a lot more about viruses and medicines and vaccines than I ever wanted to know by looking into the parameters, the foundations of COVID, quote unquote.
Yeah, and gain of function research, it was started in China, but not by China.
Actually, actually, that whole thing is nonsense. Have you ever seen the movie series Coma?
I heard of it, never saw it.
The main focus was the Jefferson Institute, which is where they sent people who had gone into comas to be taken care of because they were neither dead nor alive. And then the promotion of it was the Jefferson Institute was advocated and supported by the FDA, the CDC, and the WHO. And the Jefferson Institute was merely a holding place. It was a chop shop for organ harvesting. I said, I have no doubt that those three organizations supported it. That's big bucks when you're talking about organ harvesting. And if you can type and match people to various people needs. Let's say somebody needs a heart, and this person comes to the hospital to have a knee surgery done, and they lined up. That's what the series is about, and all their particulars line up. We've got the demand here, we've got the supply, and we've got the demand, and that's what Jefferson Institute was for. And it was a chop shop.
Yeah, I remember seeing a series, something like that. I forget the name of it now.
There, there's a lot of them, but they're very
Yeah,
um, well red pill type of drama. And how did they get so close? How did they know? Type of thing. And the individual, I think, was it Robin Cook? I think was the author of the original book Coma, and that was produced in I think in the 70s with Genevieve Bujold and Michael Douglas. They were the two characters in it. They redid this, I think, in 2012, way more sinister. And but anyway, I thought everybody really needs to watch this to see what the medical profession is all about. It's the bottom line. That's why
yeah.
COVID was so popular. The bottom line. Don't kid yourself. The third cause of death in this country is medical care.
Um,
Number one is abortion, but they don't count that in this. Then you've got cancer and heart disease, medical care. Number three. So can you
auto
take
accidents is up there.
Can you take a pill for that? I'd stay away from it. That's how you deal with medical care. Stay away. Okay. So having said that, you know how this kind of spreads out. One of the things that Jim and I have discovered in our presentations is the the training people, young and old, have in dealing with our history, particularly World War II. Well, why is that? First of all, I don't know what your ethnic background is, but there are what, 6 major media companies that run everything in our country.
Yeah,
And there are 6 or 7. And I think 6 of them, the CEOs are Jews. And they've been running things since 2040s, since the 40s. Oh, even before then. Where and they creep up on the decency ratings. Almost every single new movie has some sort of criticism against the Third Reich or Hitler. And my daughter even noticed, she said to a friend of hers, do you know why everybody's always bringing out Hitler this, Hitler that? Because it's part of a training film type thing. Well, you don't want to be as bad as Hitler. Now, wait a minute. Okay. Again, like I said at the beginning, even playing field. Let's take a look at the characters of World War II. And if you want to take a look, what are the stats on France? Well, they didn't really do anything. Best thing that ever happened to them was when Germany marched down the Champs-Élysées.
yeah.
Anyway, that was the best thing that ever happened to France. They had a strong support from Vichy in France. So were they responsible for a lot of the deaths? Let me tell you, when Hitler was involved in sending Jews to Palestine, helping them leave Europe to go to Palestine, France trotted out 10,000 of their Jewish citizens to send along with. You got any extra room? And then, okay, what about England? Well, it's like Churchill was trying to play catch up. With who? Well, not with Hitler, because Churchill started the bombing first. Hitler was unprepared. He just was not going to be firing on English citizens until after 3 months. Churchill would not give up the bombing. They bombed Freiburg first. Well, let's take a look at how about the Americans? Well, they weren't really involved right away, but the real criminals were the Soviets. And that became evident afterwards. How about trotting out what they did before World War II? What they do to the Ukrainians? At that time? What did they do during the Holodomor? Tens of millions of Russians were starved to death and killed. Well, what was that all about? How many of the people in our country understand these things? That's what you call leveling the playing field. Well, unfortunately, we don't have the right to talk about those things because people go into this glass side mode. A friend of mine was saying, she was talking to her son-in-law and started talking about, he brought it up. So she has said, I won't talk about it unless you bring it up. And you bring it up, we're going to talk about it. And that's what we do too. And so she talked about what was going on in Germany and to Germany. And he got all, and get all crazy and shuts her down. Her family shuts her down. Okay, that's not the government doing it. Not directly. They support and are supported by the Jewish media. And also that includes the movie industry. I don't even watch the Oscars anymore. I can't. It's
We
so.
haven't watched them in a long time.
Oh, I know. Me either. I have no.
So, since you
Yeah.
touched on World War II, with the diverging bit, how did Hitler get into power?
Oh, really? That's what they. Okay. Thank you, sir.
No
Yeah.
one talks about that.
Well, they don't talk about the specifics because they don't know the specifics. How about let's
Well,
talk about the Holocaust? Because that's the boot on our neck. That's the power base of the Jews behind all these other agencies. You want to know why they get away with what they do? Let's use Gaza, for example, because it's fairly well known. Oh,
it all starts with getting Hitler into power. He was a destitute person. The army they had that translates to the brown shirts were basically broke.
no, that is not true. That is not true. In fact, the Freikorps were the ones that came after when there was a problem dealing with the Versailles Treaty. The Freikorps were the ones that attempted to control the communist uprising in the various cities. But no, Hitler was not the beginning of the problem. Hitler was not the problem. In fact, the Holocaust, which they trot out the 6 million, that was blamed on the Tsar. that was blamed on any alleged atrocities in Russia or
Well,
other countries. That was blamed on them. Okay, and besides, there weren't 6 million
so
Jews
back
in
to
the right.
Hitler, through lots of propaganda flyers, J.D. Rockefeller, um, DuPont,
Rothschild.
the royal family, right, supported Hitler to put him into power
No, that isn't true.
to
That isn't
to
true. In fact, I have
to
just read
go
something that
after
the international.
Russia because Russia at the time was building up strength, and Germany was somewhat building up strength, and they figured to fight each other and destroy each other.
Okay, now that I believe was the case. The problem is Hitler's non-aggression pact with Stalin, with a lot of good that did for either one of them. But they wanted to neutralize the potential to keep England and France basically from declaring war on Hitler. So because they would be concerned about that. But the thing is, I'll be very, very happy to send you a couple things, some interesting points of which you have mentioned. A lot of the stuff you've mentioned is very faulty. Admittedly, the Jews were the international bankers, particularly in New York, were in charge of the money. But we just got finished reading that as a result of the boycott in 1933, they didn't want to give Hitler any support. They didn't want to help him at all. But I'd be happy to, like I said, send something. I kind of cut my teeth on these things that I'll be sending you.
Okay,
By the
so
way, none of these things which we've been talking about will be allowed to be spoken of if oh good, if Trump has his way and is make Israel great again, he has declared that any criticism and any anti-Semitism, any Holocaust denial in any way is going to be punishable. And he said by death. Now I think he's blown smoke. He will have to do a serious end run around the Constitution for this. But it's like he said once about gun control. Well, let's just take the guns. They can deal with it in court.
well, you have was it JPAC that controls lots of people in DC?
It's all controlled. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And APAC, JPAC, I like that better.
JPAC, APAC.
It's APAC, but I do like JPAC better. That seems to describe it a lot better. But where do you, I'm not going to ask you where you live. Are you a county precinct? You're running for office?
Yeah, local office in my town.
He's keeping
Yeah,
us on schedule, isn't he?
what's that?
He's keeping us on schedule.
Yeah, yeah. Making sure we don't go over.
Well, I appreciate that.
Um, I think we have about 3 minutes left. I didn't see what you flashed up
He
there.
said 1 minute.
1 minute?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll wrap up then.
Okay.
Okay, so to the audience watching, no, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And if you just go against the bad policies, then you agree with them.
And also, if do not have the right to express my opinion, nobody's going to. Either we all have freedom of speech, or there is no freedom of speech.
Right. So look for a guy out bikini out on the streets, and May 20th, vote for just him. Diane, thank you for coming on,
Thank you,
and
sir.
we'll be in touch.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for watching this broadcast. As it says at the beginning of the preamble, we the people. That's you, that's myself. Are you part of the solution or part of the problem? One way to tell is if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. So call, email, meet with your reps and senators, local leaders, tell them what they should be doing. They govern with the consent of the governed, and if you don't tell them what to do, it's implied that you agree with them and they're doing what you want them to do. So thank you very much again, and look forward to seeing you to the next broadcast.